Burlington, den største byen i den vestlige staten Vermont i det nordøstlige USA, helt på grensen til Canada. Med sine under 50 000 innbyggere, ingen stor by efter amerikanske mål. Burlington gir med sine idylliske bolighus i New England-stil inntrykk av solid, jevn småborgerlighet. Og et bysentrum som er preget av tradisjon og moderne ideer på samme tid. Det er en velstelt og ren by, renere enn de fleste amerikanske byer. Det er en by der forretningslivet blomstrer. Det er absolutt intet ved denne byen som gir noen som helst assosiasjoner med sosialisme. Men Burlington har faktisk en sosialistisk ordfører. Det er den eneste by i det kapitalistiske USA som har det. I år ble den 45-årige Bernie Sanders, opprinnelig statsviter og innflytter fra Brooklyn i New York, valgt til Burlingtons ordfører for 4. gang. Og det skjedde med et større flertall enn noen gang før. Ja, svært mange av dem som ved siste presidentvalg stemte på den konservative Ronald Reagan, ga i kommunevalget sin stemme til sosialisten Bernie Sanders.
You are a self-described socialist. What is your vision of socialism in America?
Well, my belief is, my very strong belief, is that this nation, because of its incredible wealth, its technology, its natural resources, in fact, has the capabilities of providing a decent standard of living for every man, woman, and child. And that's just not, at this point, a utopian vision. I think that's a concrete economic reality if we used our resources rationally, and if the productive capabilities of the system were used to provide decently for all the people rather than to make certain people extremely rich. The distribution of wealth in this country, as you may or may not know, is one of the most unfair and distorted in the entire world.
Yeah, but how can you practically change that very uneven distribution?
Well, I think you can change it politically. I think you change it through tax laws. I think you change it through public ownership of significant parts of the economy. I think you change it by providing what every industrialized country in the world is doing, for example, is decent health care for its people through national health programs. I think you do it by providing decent housing for its people through public involvement in housing. We have the resources to do it.
But how can you believe in socialism as an idea when people in socialist countries don't believe in it?
Well, I think that's perhaps a debatable issue, and I think that has to do with what the kinds of socialist policies that have been developed by the socialist countries.
Do you see any country today in the world, any country which is socialist?
I think that there are different countries at different levels. For example, if you talk about what's going on in Sweden today, is Sweden having any problems? Of course they're having problems. But you know, one can't isolate a situation and say, look, socialism has failed over there, compared to what? Do you know that in the United States of America today, the average married couple can no longer afford a home? They can't afford a home. The average standard of living of the average American person, working person, is declined. Our manufacturing capabilities are being ruptured all over this country right now. We're losing millions of manufacturing jobs. So I think in many ways there are problems all over this world, but I'm not sure that many people are aware of the severe economic problems that are existing in our country as well.
But aren't the poor and unprivileged in America too few to really make a revolution to change the system?
When we talk about what goes on in the United States, I don't know that if many of our European friends understand that the vast majority of poor people in America don't vote. They do not vote. 80–90% of poor people have given up on the political process. Then if you're talking about the lower middle class, working people, the majority of those people don't vote. On national elections, we're lucky often if we have half of the people coming out to vote. On state elections, local elections, it's often much less than that. Now here in Burlington, we do very, very well. And we get about half of the people out to vote. In other communities in our state and throughout New England, you might get 20% of the people out to vote, 10% of the people out to vote on occasion. So I think one of the major problems that we have in our country is that the political situation is so controlled by people with big money that working people and poor people have given up on the process.
But what does it take to make the two major parties care?
Well, I don't know, and I don't really care. I'm not part of the two major parties. I think what we have got to do is to stand up and articulate the issues. Now, it's one thing for people to acknowledge that the solutions are difficult to come by, and they are. I do not have any magic solutions to the problems. But what is very clear is that the two major parties don't even deal with the real issues. They create phony issues. For example, I mean, the newspapers in America for the last month have been dealing with this Iran-Contra fiasco. And that in itself is a joke. The real story is that both the Democratic and Republican parties voted, they raised their hands in Congress with President Reagan at the top, to go to war against the people of Nicaragua. Okay? That's really what the issue is. To spend $100 million destroying the government of Nicaragua and committing terrible, terrible suffering. Both parties agreed with that policy. That's really the issue.
So you don't even see the Democrats or the liberal wing of the Democrats being better, a better alternative than the Republicans?
We could argue what better or worse is about, but if you look at real problems facing this country, for example, a fair foreign policy, the Democratic Party in Congress voted to support Reagan, or else we would not have gone to war against the people of Nicaragua. The Democratic Party in Congress essentially is also part of the Cold War effort, the anti-Soviet effort. Do I believe that the Democratic Party in Congress is really working hard to bring about world peace and significant reductions in the military? Some are, and I'm not here to condemn all. There are some excellent members of Congress, but the leadership of the party is not.
But do you see a possibility of a third party in America? Is that really a practical option?
Well, this is an issue that's been debated for about 100 years in the United States of America. And there are those people like myself who do see that that is the future. There are other people who think that one should work within the Democratic Party. My experience in working within the Democratic Party is that it's useless. Not my experience, I haven't, but observing good people who have. Ultimately, I think what you find out on the national level and on the state level is that the people who control the Republican Party are not very different from the people who control the Democratic Party.
As a socialist mayor of Burlington, you had to apply certain capitalist means in order to make the system work, like exploiting free competition, etc.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are one small city of 38,000 in a country of 240 million people. And I think essentially what we are trying to do is, under very difficult circumstances, we have lost a lot of federal help. We are trying to do the best that we can for poor people and working people, and that's what we're trying to do.
What, in your view, what is the most important goals you have achieved?
Probably is an intangible goal. And the intangible goal is that before I became mayor, relatively small numbers of people voted in local elections. For example, if you go down to the city clerk's office, you'll find in mayoral elections 6, 7, 8,000 people voting. Now we have 11, 12, 13,000 people voting. So a lot more people now are thinking about local government, what it can do, what it should do. That's probably ultimately the most important thing that we've done. We've gotten people excited about the potential of participating in local government. We have a number of concrete achievements as well in terms of improving the environment within our city, creating a large number of jobs, doing some of the best youth programs in the state of Vermont, involving kids in a lot of activities, women's programs, and so forth.
But how would Burlington look like after the generation of Southernist rule?
Well, I hope we won't have to worry about that for a while.
So you don't cope with the fear of certain people of the People's Republic of Burlington?
No, I think, well, we just, as you know, we just won a re-election the other day in a rather big victory. And I think what people know is that here in Burlington we are doing a very good job in all areas, virtually all the areas. One of the concerns that we have here in the state of Vermont is that our tax structure, in my view, is quite unfair. We are very dependent on regressive forms of taxation. So while we need more money to do a variety of things, the very few ways that are open to us are regressive ways. And one of the major things that we are trying to do is to go down to our state government and get more broader tax authority so that we can have more progressive taxation.
How do you cope with the pettiness of day-to-day politics in a rather small city?
Well, that's a very good question, and the answer is it is very hard. I would say if there's one thing that I find very, very frustrating about local government is the day-to-day pettiness and the personal pettiness. I think I have been helped immensely by having a very good staff around me of people who have taken a lot of that burden off of my shoulders, but there's no question that that's there. Local government is the home of pettiness, and that's unfortunate.
Where are you going from here? Well, you have another period as a mayor, but do you have any ideas about your own political future?
No, I really don't. This is what I told the people. This is the fourth election that I've won. I will then serve 8 years, and that will be all.
So we won't see you in Congress sometime?
Well, you won't see me here in the mayor's chair if you come back 2 years from now.
Going back to foreign affairs, people in Vermont and in Burlington, they are concerned about the world
Yes.
questions of peace, war and peace. How do you explain that? Might be more than people elsewhere in this country.
Well, it's a good question. I don't know the explanation for that, but Vermont has, for many, many years, people in our state have expressed great concern about the issues of war and peace. And we have an active peace movement in our state. And I cannot tell you why. I am very proud, for example, that our 3 congressional representatives, 2 senators and a congressman, all voted against Contra, aid to the Contras. I don't know. I think we have some down-to-earth people here who do understand that unless there's a radical rethinking of American foreign policy and our continued dependency on nuclear weapons, I mean, we're spending billions and billions of dollars, unless that changes, there's going to be a world war. So I would assure our European friends that not everybody in the United States believes in Ronald Reagan's philosophy of foreign policy.
So you don't think America has turned for good to the right?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I think what there is, though, is in America a much greater political ignorance, if you like, than Europeans can really understand. For example, the whole issue of class analysis. To a large degree, the system here in America has diluted that significantly, so that many of the trade unions are extremely conservative. Half of the white American trade unionists, for example, voted for Ronald Reagan for president. We don't have a long and militant trade union history as many of the European countries, where socialism and labor unions have been working together for 100 years. In America, that's not the case, and that's unfortunate. We have a very, very powerful system, a ruling class system, and it's very different than the European system. It's not as rigid. We don't have a king and a queen, but what you have is people who own the television stations. Very, very powerful, and very heavy degree of censorship. For example, just comparing American television with Canadian television, and we're only 50 miles south of Canada, is night and day. Class issues are not allowed to be talked about on American television or radio. The nature of the newspapers are more and more concentration of large corporations owning the newspapers in various cities. So in terms of the information that people are getting out, for example, just last night I was watching Canadian television, which we get down here. There was a program on Cuba. We're not allowed to see those programs here in the United States.
But with such a power and owner structure in the media, how do you explain the fact that you have been re-elected for the 4th time?
Well, because we are a small city, and a small state, relatively small state. And I'm not here to suggest that the local media does not put what I say on. There's quite a difference between talking about our local television station and our local newspaper and the mass media in the United States of America. We're a small state. I knock on many, many doors. I get a fair shake from our local media in general.